Semiconductors, those tiny but crucial components, power everything from our smartphones to fighter jets. These microchips, essential to modern technology, form a $574 billion industry set to reach $1 trillion soon. However, this industry is now caught in the middle of a tense standoff between the United States and China. The trade restrictions from the US are affecting semiconductor companies, leading to warnings of significant sales drops. As China strives for self-reliance in semiconductors, a decade-long technological tug-of-war unfolds. This battle not only impacts companies, but raises questions about the future landscape of global technology. China's semiconductor industry challenges. China is facing a tough situation in the semiconductor world. It's not keeping up with the big tech countries like the US, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Unlike these tech giants, China relies a lot on other countries for its tech chips. These chips are crucial for things like PCs, smartphones, and AI training. The problem is that China has to import these chips from countries that are not just selling, but also competing with them. This makes China vulnerable to disruptions in the global supply chain. Even though China is putting a lot of money into boosting its semiconductor industry, it's still behind. So despite all the effort and funds, China is still dependent on other countries for the technology they need. The US trade restrictions and impact on semiconductor companies. Now, the United States is making things even tougher for China with trade restrictions. These restrictions are hitting companies in the semiconductor business. One big player, NVIDIA, has already sounded the alarm about a significant drop in sales to China. The US administration is putting a cap on China's access to advanced AI chips. These restrictions are not just a little hurdle, they are affecting the development of China's own semiconductor industry. NVIDIA, a major player in making high-performance chips, is feeling the pinch. They found a way around the restrictions at first, but the US government closed that loophole in 2023. This move by the US is not just about sales, it's affecting the whole game. The new rules control almost every data center or GPU that NVIDIA sells in China. Other companies like AMD and Intel are also feeling the impact. While NVIDIA downplays the immediate financial hit, they admit it might affect their future products and might even force them to move some operations. China's response and escalation in 2022. China didn't just take the US trade restrictions lightly. In fact, they fought back. One notable move came in 2023, when China's cyberspace regulator raised concerns about chipmaker Micron, saying it posed a big security risk to China's critical infrastructure supply chain. China didn't stop there. They slowed down business deals, like Intel trying to buy Tower Semiconductor by not giving approval. In July 2023, China also put export restrictions on two metals, gallium and germanium, needed for making chips. While these actions might seem small, they show China's pushback. But here's the catch. China doesn't have many options within semiconductors. They can do a bit around raw materials, but they don't lead in making these high-tech chips. China's main strategy over the last decade has been pouring tons of money into building up their chip industry. It's a bit of a tricky situation for China because they need these chips, but don't have full control over them. Apple's move away. Additionally, in 2019, the person who started Foxconn, Terry Gou, said Apple should make its stuff somewhere else, making people wonder if it was just a political thing since he ran for president in Taiwan. Apple, a big deal in China, had lots of people working there and put almost $300 billion into the country. They were like building with the Chinese government and all. But then, kind of quietly, things started changing. Apple's connection with the Chinese companies and where they get their stuff from shifted. As Apple and its flagship iPhone grew to global dominance over the past 2 decades, much of that has come with the help of China. Just take a look at this. Despite the efforts to diversify, over 95% of iPhones, AirPods, Macs, and iPads are still made in China. The part of the money they shared with the Chinese companies went down from 61% to 47%. Apple added new suppliers from outside China and started making their major products in places other than China. As of the end of 2023, Apple had outsourced its manufacturing process to India, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Vietnam besides China. The boss of Apple, Tim Cook, was at China's big yearly event, but showed they were slowly moving away. Other companies not so tied up with China were already making big moves. This change in where they make stuff was just the start of problems for China's tech part. People who figured things out predicted China's making things would go down because workers in China started getting paid more, and there were fewer young people to work in factories. Around the world, companies felt the pressure to make things in different places. Companies around the world are considering India, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Vietnam, and a few European countries to make their products. Even companies from China started making their stuff outside because of political pressure. But China might still be the boss in some areas, like electric cars. China had big plans with this thing called Made in China 2025. They wanted to lead in AI, 5G, and more. The government was all about helping with money and stuff, but other countries and challenges got in the way. China's tech companies faced bans and troubles in different countries. Political fights made big companies like Alibaba and TikTok leave some places. Financial impact on U.S. companies. The consequences of this tech and trade war are hitting U.S. companies where it hurts, in their pockets. The biggest impact is on the company's supply equipment. Manufacturers in China need stuff from Europe and the US, and tech companies need tools to design their chips. Big names like Applied Materials and Lam Research saw several $billion in revenue get affected because of this. Applied Materials saw a loss of more than $1 billion, while Lam Research had a $2 to $2.5 billion revenue hit amidst this tech war. NVIDIA, the maker of super powerful chips, initially found a way around the US export restrictions by making slightly less advanced chips. They were just below the performance limit, so they could still be sold legally. So the financial impact is real. If NVIDIA can't sell as much to China, it's not just about today. It could mean a smaller market for them in the long run. Other US chip makers are also warning that more controls might speed up China's journey to self-sufficiency in chips, leading to a world where Chinese-made chips rule the market. These dollars and cents are adding up, and the stakes are getting higher. Concerns on AI and national security. It's not just about money and business. The US has some serious worries about artificial intelligence, or AI. This is a big deal because AI is seen as a game changer for the future. It's supposed to shake up all sorts of industries, and the US wants to be in control of who gets their hands on the chips that power this AI. Here's the deal. The US is concerned that if China gets these chips, it might end up using them for military stuff. The US military invests more in technology than anyone else, and as China builds up its military power, the US wants to keep its technological edge. China has this system where they mix private and public stuff when it comes to technology. They buy these fancy chips meant for regular stuff and put them into military equipment. The US government doesn't like that because they worry that China might use these chips to upgrade their military. The idea is that if China gets a hold of the same chips that power our phones and computers, they might use them in ways that the US doesn't like, especially in the military. So it's not just about selling chips, it's about keeping control over who gets the technology that can be a game changer, especially in the military game. It's a big concern for national security, and the US doesn't want to take any chances. Let's talk about Huawei, a big name in Chinese tech. In 2023, they did something that caught everyone's attention. They released a new smartphone, the Mate 60 Pro, with an advanced chip made by China's largest chip maker, SMIC. Now, why is this a big deal? Because both Huawei and SMIC are on the list called the Entity List by the US. Being on this list means they can't buy American tech. It's like being told you can't shop in a certain store. So Huawei making this new chip is seen as a kind of breakthrough. It shows that even with these restrictions, China can still make its own advanced chips. But here's the catch. These chips are not as fancy as the ones in this year's Apple iPhone 15 Pros. Those iPhones use a more advanced chip from Taiwan, which is a big player in making top-notch chips. The size of those chips matters too. Smaller chips can be more powerful and efficient. The fact that Huawei's chips are not as small or powerful as those from Taiwan shows the US controls are working to some extent. This Huawei move raises eyebrows in Washington. People are wondering how they managed to do it despite being on the entity list. It's not just about making a chip, it's about whether China can do it on a large scale and keep up with the global competition, long-term competition, and geopolitical implications. This whole thing isn't just a short game, it's a long-term competition between the US and China. Both countries are in a race, especially when it comes to technology like AI and chips. These are the big game changers, and both the US and China want to be on top. If the trade war and tech war keep going, and China becomes a more closed market for semiconductor firms, it could split the tech world. We might end up with a Chinese-led tech world and an American-led one. Here's the bottom line. It's not just about who's making the coolest gadgets. This is a big deal for national security. Both countries know this is a long game. They're thinking decades ahead. It's a tricky situation for businesses. They have to make decisions based on this complicated geopolitical stuff. At the end of the day, it's a competition. The US wants to lead in tech, but they're clear that national security comes first. As we look ahead, the consequences are big. Will China catch up in tech, or will the US stay ahead? The competition is on, and it's not just about business. It's about who controls the future of the tech world. Make sure to like and subscribe for more updates on this business and tech showdown.